Good afternoon, everyone. We are going to go ahead and convene this committee session of the Health and Human Services Committee. Today is Thursday, June 26th, and I am joined as always by my colleagues, Councilmember Sales and Councilmember Lutke, and today we're also joined by Council President Stewart. And today, at this session, the committee will receive a briefing on the 2025 annual point-in-time count of persons experiencing homelessness and a report provided by Ms. Chapman and Mr. Kenny with the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments, and Director Hong with DHHS will also, Chief Hong with DHHS will also present on Montgomery County's specifics within this report. So thank you all very much for being here today. Ms. Clemens-Johnson, anything I missed? Anything you also want to add?
No, I think we're all set.
Great.
Thank you to our guests for attending.
Thank you all so much. So, Chief Hong, I will turn it over to you to make introductions and get us started.
Thank you so much for inviting us here today. We're really excited to share with you about our work. We have such a dedicated team, not only in Montgomery County, but across the region, and I'm honored to have the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments team here, including Hillary Chapman as well as Samuel Kenny, and they will provide a regional report of the point-in-time count from January 2025. And then after that, I will provide a more local Montgomery County report, as well as recommendations that we have for the county, given the significant increase we saw this year in January. And so really glad to start it off, and really glad to be here, and so thankful for all of your support over the past year as we've seen a rise in our numbers. So with that, I will pass it to...
Actually, just very quickly, point of privilege, I just want to thank the Council of Governments. You are such an important institution and organization and convener in our region. Obviously, we've been through a heck of a lot together these last 5 years and are about to go through a heck of a lot more. So we can't thank you enough for your leadership. I know Councilmember President Stewart has represented our council overall, and before her, Councilmember Navarro. So we really want to thank you for your leadership. But with that, we'll turn it over to you.
Well, thank you and good afternoon. Chair Albornoz, committee members Lutke, Sales, and also Council President Stewart. I'm Hillary Chapman. I'm the Housing Program Manager at the Council of Governments. I'm here with my colleague Sam Kenny this afternoon, and I'm just really thrilled to be here and appreciate the opportunity to share the results of the 2025 enumeration with you. And also, so Sam is going to start out by going over the results of the 2025 point-in-time count. And then I will conclude with sharing how Montgomery County, is part of COG's regional efforts, have been collaborating to prevent and end homelessness beyond just the point-in-time count. So I'm going to hand it over to my colleague Sam.
Thank you so much, Hillary. Thank you so much, council members. I'm very excited to be here today. So my name is Sam Kenny. I'm the Regional Homeless Systems Coordinator at the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments. And as Hillary said, we are going to talk about the point-in-time count today. And so a couple things that I wanted to note up front. So the annual point-in-time count normally happens across the region on a single date in January. This year was a little bit different, a little bit special. There was 2 dates across the region. The 29th for Montgomery County, Prince George's County, and Washington, D.C. The 22nd for 4 counties in Northern Virginia and the city of Alexandria. This was due to inauguration-related concerns about having the count on the 22nd in this region in the District of Columbia. So this is just something to keep in mind as we consider the results, and I think leads to a broader thing to keep in mind, a broader idea to keep in mind around the point-in-time count. It is that it is only a point in time. Unfortunately, people experience homelessness every night of the year. So it really is a snapshot, and this data is extremely important across the region as we think about homelessness over the years, but it is also not the full picture, right? There's additional data sources, there's additional factors to consider. So what we are presenting today is a snapshot, and we want to continue to think about our work more broadly and deeply when it comes to improving data. The last thing I would just say with respect to the point-in-time count before getting into the numbers is how much we appreciate and are grateful for the work of so many providers, volunteers, experts across the continuums of care across the region. This is a significant effort. It is HUD mandated, and nonetheless, it takes significant coordination to bring everyone together to get an accurate count and to think about rolling that data up, getting it to the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments, and then being able to talk about this in a regional way. I think that is something that shows a significant degree of collaboration and coordination across the region. I just want to be thankful to all of our partners for that. So if we could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. Okay, so on this first slide, as you can see, this is a slide looking over the last 5 years of the point-in-time counts at a regional level. And a couple of things that I want to point out initially for the committee. The first is obviously the top line number, which is that 9,659 individuals were experiencing homelessness on those nights in January across the region. A few other things to keep in mind. So this is about a regional, a decrease of about 1% or 115 persons across the region between 2024 and 2025. It's keeping sort of our glance regionally. There was a flattening, if you will, across the region compared to the previous 2 years. The previous 2 years, from really a low in 2022, there was sharp increases in 2023, 2024, and then ultimately a bit of a regional leveling in 2025. This is really important at a regional level to keep in mind, and as we can see on the slide here, there's significant regional variation. We have some continuums of care which have increases, some which have decreases, and even a variety of different magnitudes within those both percentages and numbers of people. So it's clear that as a region, 1 point doesn't make a trend, but we are pleased to at least see that leveling off at that regional level, and also are interested in sort of getting into the weeds and understanding what is happening at the local level and where continued progress can be made. So next slide, please. So this next slide, we get into a little bit of a finer breakdown at the regional level of people experiencing homelessness by family type. So by household type, rather, including families with children, singles is that first column, so persons of households without children, and then ultimately unaccompanied minors as well. So first I draw your attention to the upper right-hand corner, which shows that, again, 9,569 people were experiencing homelessness on that specific night, and that is the summation of these three categories. And then that first column, what we see in the 2025, 24, and all the way back to 2021 numbers are that the vast majority of people experiencing homelessness in the region are single adults. When we look at sort of that percentage change over the last 5 years, we can see that there's a 7% increase. There is an increase of these single adults experiencing homelessness, but it is not driving a larger increase across the continuums of care. When we look over then to the families column, we see that the increase is significantly larger in percentage terms. While the magnitude is still lower, the increase from 2021 to 2025 in the number of families experiencing homelessness is, as you will hear from Chief Hong, Montgomery County numbers, but also regional numbers as well. And I think that's something worth pointing out. And again, sort of thinking back to that first slide on the broader numbers across the region, when we look over those 5 years, we did see an increase in homelessness across the entire region for those 5 years for everyone. And then for the third column over here, looking at unaccompanied minors, this data I think is important to collect as part of the point in time, but is less illustrative of other data sources like local school data or McKinney-Vento data when it comes to children experiencing homelessness. But nonetheless, we did see a decrease across the region around 6 families for a total of 10 families. Next slide, please. So this next slide here I think is important for a couple of reasons, and this is focusing on individuals, single adults experiencing chronic homelessness. And sort of the broad line numbers here across the region are a relatively modest increase from 24 to 25. This builds on an increase from 23 to 24 after a decrease from the previous 2 years. And the reason out of all the different ways we can slice and dice data, it's important to think about people experiencing chronic homelessness. One is because this is a specific definition provided by the Housing and Urban Development. Roughly, the definition is somebody experiencing homelessness for a year or more, and or somebody experiencing homelessness 3 or more times, that add up to a year over 3 years. And so the key takeaway, I think, from that information are these are individuals who are interacting with the system consistently, and these are individuals interacting with the system in a way that suggests they need supportive services and oftentimes deeply affordable housing. So when we think about the health and well-being of a homeless services system, meeting the needs of chronic homeless is, of course, something that's very important. I'm sure you'll hear more from Chief Hong on specific numbers for the Montgomery County region as well. But just to note that the overall, the average increase, or the net increase rather, for the region was relatively modest. So we had 4 communities that increased, saw increases in chronic homeless, and 4 communities that saw decreases. So again, sort of that interjurisdictional variability, which is interesting. When we think about meeting the needs of people experiencing chronic homelessness, in particular, we think about the access to services, tracking within systems, and of course, affordable housing. And so at the end of the day, these folks need supportive services and housing to help them move into something of a more stable situation. Next slide, please. On this next slide here, we can see the racial disparities of people who experience homelessness across the entire region. The slide really speaks for itself. There's a clear and fairly staggering disproportion of people experiencing homelessness across the region who are African American. Across the region, this is true in nearly in 7 of the 8 continuums of care. When we think about Montgomery specifically, Montgomery County has a bit more diversity, if you will, in who's experiencing homelessness. Approximately 18% Hispanic, approximately 18% white, and approximately 15% African American or Black. But I think we still see this sort of same trend or curve in the graph if you look at those specific numbers. As has been the case across the work that the region has done, the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments, and thinking about race equity in housing, this is one of the main drivers here. The outcomes are clearly disparate. This did not change in 2025. This was very similar to the numbers in 2024 and the trends before the years. So something important to call out. Next slide, please. Next, we are looking here at veteran homelessness, so the number of veterans experiencing homelessness across the region. So everyone who is experiencing homelessness is deserving of services and policies that are able to meet their needs. But in particular, it's important to be able to understand veterans experiencing homelessness from a resource and systems perspective, because oftentimes there are additional both resources and funding and services for veterans experiencing homelessness. So it serves both as an important population to support on its merits, but then of course to understand sort of how the system is working and who is receiving services and so forth. So at a regional level, what we saw was a decrease in veterans experiencing homelessness of about 3%, or 10 veterans, compared to 2024. This was after a small increase in 2020 from 2023 and a very large increase from 2022. So we're seeing the regional numbers bounce around a fair amount here on veterans experiencing homelessness. As my colleague Hillary will speak about in a little bit, we are working at a regional level in coordination around a variety of efforts, and part of that is to better understand veterans experiencing homelessness at the local level and then rolling that up to a regional level as well. So I think this is an area where we want to continue to have a focus on, and in terms of understanding who is experiencing homelessness, and then ultimately sort of as a bellwether for how we can improve our systems moving forward. Next slide, please. Next here we have a slide on the fact that more seniors are experiencing homelessness. So this is important for a variety of reasons. If you would have looked at this graph on average sort of across the country and probably in the region as well over about 20 years ago, you would have seen that spike around ages between 45 and 54. If you would have looked at it 40 years ago, you would have seen that spike between 35 and 44. It's basically that the larger population from the often said baby boomer generation is continuing to grow older, and we're seeing similar raises in homelessness. This is important because seniors experiencing homelessness tend to stress systems, and particular health systems, in a way that other younger single adults may not be doing so. And there's some good literature, and we share this in the report as well, talking about how the biological age of somebody experiencing homelessness is significantly older than somebody who has not experienced homelessness. At least the study we cite in the report talks about how somebody between 45 and 50 years old who's experienced a significant amount of homelessness in their life may actually have a biological age closer to 70 years old. So very significant. And as you can imagine, people who are 55 plus, let alone 65 plus or 75 plus experiencing homelessness are more likely to have chronic health issues and need health services in a way to meet their needs in the short run. Otherwise, they're at risk not only of significant serious illness, but also of death. So really important to keep in mind as we think about optimizing and improving systems over the course of the long run in the metropolitan region. This is not unique to the region. It is not only, and this is also true for Montgomery County when we look at the numbers more specifically. So something to keep in mind as we continue to think about improving services writ large and meeting the needs of the most vulnerable people in the homeless services system. Next slide, please. Thank you. This last slide here on the specific numbers in the report, and of course we'd be happy to take any additional questions if you've had a chance to read the report and would like to elevate any other topics, but is really looking at the formerly homeless and regional progress. So we've seen a lot of numbers. Some of them are a little bit up, some of them are a little bit down. I think the bottom line is there are too many people experiencing homelessness, and also the continuums of care are meeting the needs of lots of people experiencing homelessness. So I think we can think about both of those things at the same time. And what we see here on the blue chart is that the number of people in permanent supportive housing, rapid rehousing, or other permanent housing compared to the number of people experiencing homelessness on that day in the PID count. So they don't exactly, the numbers don't exactly add up in terms of timing, but the point I think that is really worth flagging here is that people are being moved and served according to their housing needs across the continuums of care. I know this is happening in Montgomery County as well. So I think kudos to many of the teams and the experts out there doing the work, and we know that we have roughly the same number of people experiencing homelessness in January of 2025 as we did in 2024 and a little bit more than 2023. So keeping those things in mind, I think it's really important, and I think is a really good segue to my colleague Hillary, who's going to talk a little bit more about regional collaboration, coordination, and how we think about this as a broader issue.
Thanks, Sam. Thanks for sharing those enumeration findings. We're going to switch gears a little bit here, and I'd like to share an update on our efforts to prevent and end homelessness across the metropolitan Washington region beyond this single-day count in January. So as some of you may know, in January 2024, COG was fortunate to formally kick off a partnership with national nonprofit Community Solutions. And COG's goal, as shared by our member governments, is to create greater homeless systems alignment through implementation of Community Solutions Build for Zero methodology. And you are probably likely familiar with this given Montgomery County's long-term partnership and work with Community Solutions. Through this, what this partnership means is that COG is serving as what they call a backbone organization, which basically means that we are continuing to do the things that COG does in bringing local governments and partners together to share best practices and region of this, but what it provides us with is access to technical assistance from Community Solutions, the suite of toolkits and other experience and knowledge that we can then share with other jurisdictions in the region. This is a unique partnership. Community Solutions long ago realized they couldn't be in every community in the United States all the time. And so this partnership represents an attempt to scale up those efforts through regional organizations like the Council of Governments and to provide greater alignment across at scale where we want to see those systems change to work in a complementary way to drive down rates of homelessness. So this effort represents a major step forward in aligning our data and processes across all 8 jurisdictions in COG's Homeless Services Committee. Also, I wanted to add to another important aspect of that partnership with Community Solutions was the fact that it also directly led to the hiring of my colleague Sam to expand our capacity. And so he joined the COG team in December this year and is providing additional technical assistance and support to each of our member governments and internally within our overall housing program as well. Next slide, please. So, is it not moving? Okay, well, there we go. All right, so this is just it. Slide is just here to show you a little bit about sort of the landscape of implementation of the Built for Zero methodology across the region. There are 8 jurisdictions that participate in COG's Homeless Services Committee. The 4 on the top that you see, including Montgomery County, Fairfax, District of Columbia, Arlington, have been working with Community Solutions for essentially the past decade. And the ones that are brand new to this effort include 3 Northern Virginia communities, Alexandria, Loudoun, and Prince William, and then Prince George's County in Maryland. During this first year, we've really been focused on building the foundation for success, helping these new jurisdictions achieve quality by name data and begin submitting data monthly to Community Solutions Regional Tracker. And having quality by name data means that we know who everyone is who's experiencing homelessness in each jurisdiction, and that we can follow that person's journey in real time to permanent housing. Jurisdictions new to Built for Zero are receiving technical support and peer learning opportunities to align definitions, data collection processes, and metrics with those already in place. In September, so relatively soon, we will review the progress made during the previous 6 months and develop a new regional 6-month action plan. And learning from experienced jurisdictions like Montgomery County will help inform what that path looks like. This level of coordination will take time and sustained effort, but it positions us to paint a much more complete picture of homelessness in metropolitan Washington, moving us from annual snapshots to real-time understanding. Next slide. So what does regional collaboration actually look like? This is a very poor visual attempt to sort of describe that, but in a way that's hopefully easy to digest. So COG's Human Services Policy Committee in 2020 created a regional compact to end homelessness, which was formally endorsed by COG's full board of directors in January of 2021. And this compact, which received unanimous support, envisioned creating a cross-jurisdictional, client-centered approach to end the experience of homelessness by identifying and breaking down barriers to get people the resources they need. It included 5 key tasks, 2 of which included data sharing and regional tracking and case coordination. This led to the formation of 2 working groups. The Regional Data Metrics Working Group is comprised of homeless management information systems data leads to align definitions and metrics, share data best practices, and tackle complex technical data questions. And the Regional Case Coordination Learning Collaborative is comprised primarily of coordinated entry managers, provides a framework for identifying and supporting persons who may have ties to more than one jurisdiction in the region. These 2 working groups provide a forum for discussions that are too detailed for the full Homeless Services Committee, which you see there in the middle, and acts essentially as an executive steering committee with a cross-section of representatives, including Director Hong from each local government COC staff. Much of the work that happens across jurisdictions, the coordination that happens in these works in the committee happens through these working groups, which may or may not be visible at the level of the street outreach worker or frontline service provider staff. Next slide, please. So as we look ahead as a region, it's clear that while we're making important strides, there are significant external challenges that could undermine our progress, particularly at the federal level. Federal funding threats could disrupt regional progress. As you know, the administration's proposed budget threatens to substantially change and reduce the Continuum of Care program and to cut rental assistance and public housing programs by over 40%. And these cuts would severely destabilize local efforts, force the termination of long-term housing supports, and risk pushing people back into homelessness or disrupt diversion services. Furthermore, any cuts to other essential services could compound housing instability. Proposed cuts to Medicaid, SNAP, and mental and behavioral health services would leave many low-income residents without the supports they rely on to stay stably housed. For people already on the brink, losing access to food or health care can be the tipping point that leads to eviction or homelessness. Ultimately, addressing homelessness at scale will require long-term investments in deeply affordable housing paired with supportive services. This remains the cornerstone of our strategy and approach to moving forward. Despite these challenges, our region is well positioned to respond. Through Built for Zero and other shared strategies, We now have a framework for aligning goals, data, and practices across jurisdictions so that we're acting together, not in isolation, leveraging our existing resources. Efforts that you have heard about today and are helping us move beyond siloed responses toward a more integrated and accountable regional system. Long-term success will require sustained investment in the solutions that we know work. Expanding deeply affordable housing paired with supportive services remains central to reducing and ultimately ending homelessness. Across the region, local efforts are already demonstrating that this approach can drive results from housing placements to long-term shelter stayers to flexible diversion tools that prevent new entries. To build on this momentum, we must continue to scale these strategies, support implementation across all jurisdictions, and work together to ensure that every person has a pathway to stable housing. So thank you for the opportunity to present the results from this year's point-in-time count and the region's residents experiencing homelessness and broader efforts to address, improve the homeless services system, and we'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Would it make sense to go to Chief Hung next to talk specifically about Montgomery County, and then we'll ask questions of the entire panel?
First slide about the Montgomery County enumeration, and this is really what I had hinted at our spring budget work session, that overall Montgomery County saw a significant increase in homelessness, 32% rise from 2024, and the largest rise occurred amongst families experiencing homelessness. And so you can see in these numbers in the third and fourth columns, as well as the fifth, the number of people in family units increased by 80%, which is more than half of which are children. And then the family units increased by 98%. They essentially doubled from 103 to 204. Now, what's interesting is that there was an increase in people in adult-only households, but it was not nearly as large as those in family households. You also see a 49% increase in youth, which was largely driven by parenting youth, seeing an increase in parenting youth, as well as a 32% increase in veterans, which was also veterans and families. So what we saw in our county is a significant increase this year, driven by the increase in family homelessness.
Chief Hung, I think your microphone's not on.
Thank you so much for
That's
saying
on.
that.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So that is just a review of the subpopulations and the point-in-time count. Let's move to the next slide. So the factors contributing to the increase, none of these are new to us. So high rent, with half of our renters being housing cost burdened, wages not keeping up with inflation, the end of our COVID era emergency rental assistance, our eroding safety net resources. So I'll stop here for a minute. On June 1st, the utility costs for all of our residents across the state increased, and that will certainly have a greater impact on our families, all of our households, because it means that they will have to use their limited resources, especially our low-income families I'm talking about, to cover their utility costs. And the utility assistance that we're able to give is less than it has previously been. So there's just less to assist our low-income households, which means that they have less available to go towards rent, which is usually their highest expense. So that is a challenge. Same thing with food stamps. As food stamps are less able to cover the cost of food, it means that families are having to use more of their income towards those expenses to keep the lights on, food on the table, and then often the sacrifice has been getting behind on rent payments. The result is we've been continuing to see households show up with very large arrearages at our housing stabilization services. All of our community partners who provide emergency assistance report the same, and they are, they quickly use up the budget they have on emergency assistance to pay off the amount that they can help with. Additionally, even if the financial assistance we can provide to pay off arrearages, which for county dollars, that's $3,000 maximum. We can use that. If it's not enough to cover a large arrearage, then we can use that to help a family relocate. But we're also seeing, when we don't have a lot of time to help a family relocate, that many landlords are turning down those families' applications because they have a fresh eviction filing on their credit. So that's a significant barrier there, as well as the ongoing and increasing reports of domestic violence. The Family Justice Center reported a record high number of domestic violence incidents in the fiscal year 2024. They're seeing a similar trend in fiscal year 25, so that continues to be a contributing factor, as well as the vulnerability of household members, both heads of household and children with documented disabilities. And for families with single head of households, it makes it really difficult to have increased earned income when your child has disability. So that's something that we've been seeing in the families that we've been serving through housing stabilization. Those are the major contributing factors that we have seen. And if we go to the next slide, we can look at our eviction trends, which you all are very familiar with. This is an updated slide from our last work session, and you can see that the numbers continue to increase. We're not yet at the end of FY25, but well over a doubling of the numbers from FY22. And I did look at the state DHCD numbers reported and saw that almost every county, and certainly the largest counties with the exception of Baltimore City, all saw a dramatic rise in evictions over the last year, evictions executed. So it is a statewide trend, and I'll also add that the state numbers from the point in time count from 2024 also, showed an increasing trend. Their FY25 numbers, their 2025 numbers are not yet available, and that the national numbers are also, continue to rise based on that. Let's move to the next slide. This is where we can talk more about the arrearages that our housing stabilization team is seeing. So as I shared, we can assist with an arrearage that is $3,000 or less. And we wanted to break down the percentage of arrearages that we're seeing beyond that, because it's significant. And that, of course, if we can't prevent the eviction, then it's very likely that household will enter our homeless system. So 30% of arrearages beyond 3,000 were 3,000 to 6,000, 34%, and I should stop and say this was a sampling. We did a sampling. We're still working on our data collection methods. And so we sampled the households that came to housing stabilization from January through March, and that was to match the data of the point in time count and what we saw there. And so going back to the chart, 34% had arrearages from 6,000 to 9,000, 18% had arrearages from 9 to 12,000 onward. So you can see that there were a significant number of households where we couldn't assist them, and that does contribute to rising homelessness. And I did want to also share that our services are provided to low-income households, of course, so those at 60% area median income. And I want to thank you all for your support in increasing our budget for FY26 by about $2 million, so that we can continue to stay at 60% area median income, which last year we had to adjust that for a few months because we were quickly burning through our budget. So that's the status of where we are in housing stabilization and what we saw in the 3 months leading up during the pit and after. With that, I'll go to the next slide. So this is a slide that I wanted to report back to you because it talks a little bit about our strategy of trying to reach functional zero for subpopulations. And in our previous strategic plan, the Interagency Commission on Homelessness aimed to end homelessness for all populations, which is a goal that we are embarking on generally in our work. We were not able to reach that we have not been able to reach that goal because of the rising homelessness, and it was tasked with the Interagency Commission on Homelessness to revisit and update our strategic plan, which culminated in the community-wide meeting that happened early May that I know all of you wanted to join, but you had more serious matters as far as the FY26 budget. Not serious, important. That you had to attend to that day. There were more than 200 people who joined, 45 of whom have lived experience, and they voted to prioritize the three subpopulations represented here: youth, families, and veterans. And I have to say, I'm really impressed because at that time, the point-in-time count had not yet been published, and yet they knew, and so many of them are service providers, that these are the populations that need greater focus, and so that was their vote, and the Interagency Commission on Homelessness did affirm that. So we will be working over the next 3 years to target our interventions towards these three subpopulations. I do want to clarify, because I know there was some concern that we would stop our prioritization of individual adults, and that work will continue. The majority of our resources, permanent supportive housing, rapid rehousing, are targeted to individual adults, and that is reflected in the slides and data we shared with you before this session. But there are not a lot of interventions targeted to these three subpopulations. I also want to express appreciation to the executive and all of you for supporting the approval of the special appropriation for SHARP targeted to families, and I'm going to share data on that in future slides, but that is an example of a targeted solution and what will help us to drive down our numbers for these subpopulations. And this is a picture, of course, of many of the people who attended the community-wide meeting in May. Let's go to the next slide. So the recommendations I have based on our point-in-time count is very much to invest more in preventive measures, including eviction prevention and the rental assistance program. I'll talk a little bit more about that in future slides, and then to target our prevention and housing solutions to the populations with the most significant increases. We've already done that with SHARP for families, but we also want to look at youth and veterans, and then to partner with our public housing authority to provide more housing vouchers to households experiencing homelessness or households moving up from continuum of care programs. I want to stop and provide a very exciting update. And I just met with the Vice President of Residential Services, Lynn Hayes, at HOC prior to coming here. And there are solutions that HOC will be allocating specifically for households experiencing homelessness. I have to express great gratitude to Council President Stewart and Councilmember Albornoz for being at a recent meeting to underscore the importance of the collaboration between the continuum of care, SEF, and HOC. And I think that Ms. Hayes and I discussed many solutions that we can deepen our work on together, and so I'm very excited to be able to say that there are some solutions coming down the pipe that will specifically be targeted towards people experiencing homelessness in general, and that is so important because many of the jurisdictions across the country who have been able to reach functional zero for certain populations have done it by partnering with their public housing authority and increasing the number of vouchers available to people experiencing homelessness. So just want to express my gratitude to you all for your support. Let's move to the next slide, and we can talk about one of our very successful targeted interventions. That is a short-term housing and resolution program. So you all remember you had just approved the special appropriation in December, which we started receiving funds for mid-January, and just in the span of 4 months, we were able to house 121 families. That is really incredible, and it shows that not only do we have a really strong and robust infrastructure That's our community partners, our shelter system, all the case management and clinical staff who do that work every day. And when we have the political will, when we have the resources, we can drive down those numbers. And I'll show that to you a little bit more in the, let's go 2 slides from here first, and then we can come back to the other demographic data. So this is, you had seen this in the spring, and I had shared with you how the inflow of families has over the last year has been greater than the outflow. And an inflow, of course, is when families enter homelessness, and outflow is when they become permanently housed. It's not when they leave our shelters, it's when they become permanently housed. And so the yellow bars in general have been greater than the gray bars, which show the net increase with that red line in family homelessness. So this shows what we see in our point-in-time count. But then when you look at February, partially in January, that's mid-January, January 15th is when the money started flowing for the SHARP program, you can see that red line drop, and you can see that the gray bar is increasing month by month. Those are the families that we housed in permanent housing who exited the system. And when we are able to keep that red line going downwards, that is how we are able to reach functional zero. So I'm very optimistic that we can reach functional zero for families because of the support that you all provided, our executive and our county in general, to support an allocation of resources targeted to reducing family homelessness. Let me go back to the demographic slide. So here you can see, it's a little fuzzy, I actually have to put my glasses on to see the numbers myself, that the populations that are impacted continue to reflect those who are most vulnerable, our children in our community. That's more than 60% of those who are impacted. I just want to say, even though it's 121 families, it's more than 400 people, more than half of whom are children. And in addition, you can also see that homelessness, we always say this, it's a problem of racial equity, tends to impact people of color, and certainly in Montgomery County, people of color, Black and African American households are overrepresented. And so you can also see that reflected in those who are housed through the SHARP program. So that's a little bit more of those who were housed through the program. Let me keep moving through our slides. So one of the other programs that we do talk about, but that hasn't gotten as much attention, is the rental assistance program. This is a program that provides a shallow subsidy to households either who have a documented disability or who are older adults. And it's a great program because for those who are on fixed incomes, a subsidy of up to $503 a month can mean the difference between staying stably housed or experiencing homelessness. It's really a wonderful program, and in 2025, we have served 936 households, which is excellent. And there's a lot of potential with this program, a lot of preventive potential. So one of the things that I think could really assist us in our rising numbers with families and youth as well is the rental assistance program. And that's because so many families that we're seeing entering homelessness are extremely low income. So even though those who are 60% at area median and income or below are eligible for eviction prevention, it's our families, often families are coming to us with zero income or extremely low income, 15% area median income or below. So even if we prevent their eviction, we will often see them showing back up in need of services and assistance. So a program like the rental assistance program could assist families like that. And the average funds dispersed per household are $7,850 a year. That's not a lot from my perspective, and I'll show you why in one of the next slides. But let's go to the next slide after this. So this is a slide that reflects the number of people who have been in our shelter system, that also includes safe havens and transitional shelter, in these different subpopulations. And This is over the last fiscal year, and so you can see that we've had 702 children, 225 youth, and 1,560 adults between 25 and 54, and 569 older adults, that's 55 years or older. The dark blue color are those who are in families. So if we applied the rental assistance program to families, expanded the eligibility to all families who are low income and not just families who have a head of household who's disabled or an older adult, we could potentially help these individuals from avoiding the experience of homelessness that they have had this past year. In addition to that, we're talking about prioritizing youth. And if we expanded the rental assistance program to serve youth, we could prevent them from entering the system, because part of the challenge with youth is engagement and prevention. A lot of times they're doubling up. Our school system is aware of them, and we need to use that information to prevent them from entering the system at all. And if we expanded our eligibility for the rental assistance program, we could assist them further. So this is just something that could assist us in being able to prevent more households from experiencing homelessness. The second set of data listed are the individual adults eligible for permanent supportive housing who are currently experiencing homelessness. This is just month by month showing the number on our coordinated entry system list. The reason why I'm showing you this is because in order to be eligible for permanent supportive housing, you must have a documented disability. And people with documented disabilities are already eligible for the rental assistance program, but we had to close the rental assistance program in August of this year because it filled up. So once we reached our budget, we had to close it. We could help many more people who are disabled if we didn't have to close that program due to budget constraints. So that's that slide. And then the last slide, let's go to that one, is the average annual cost of RAP versus motel or shelter. You all know our our figures as it pertains to the cost of motels. So I'm going to do a comparison here. And again, the rental assistance program, the average cost per year per household is $7,850. For emergency shelter for individuals, it's $28,923 a year per bed. For families, it's $73,188 per family per year. For overflow motel, it's $36,500 per year per room. So I just want to do that to show that the preventive work is more cost effective, and it saves households from the trauma of experiencing homelessness. And so for that reason, it is effective fiscally, and it's also really imperative on a human level. So with that, those are my slides, and I think we can stop for questions now.
Great, thank you so much. I have a few questions. You may not be able to answer them because they're related but not specifically presented within your slides. But do you have a sense, we think we've obviously invested heavily in our SEF programs, which we believe in, and as you've heard, we've enhanced those investments just in this last fiscal year alone. How does that compare to other jurisdictions? Are their investments similar to ours? I'll start with budgetarily, and if you know the answer to that.
So I'll take a stab at that. I would say that we have traditionally looked to Montgomery County as for leadership and innovation in the region, both in terms of its investment in housing and its approach. I would say in the region, certainly Montgomery County invests more than Fairfax County, which is a county of equivalent size and scale. But second only to the District of Columbia, which obviously is invests the most in the region, both in terms of total dollars and in terms of scale by size of the continuum of care. Now, obviously, the District of Columbia has the greatest number of people experiencing homelessness, so you would expect a greater proportionate of funding to go to those programs. But certainly Montgomery County, I think particularly during the pandemic, the way that the federal resources were targeted, specifically identifying those neighborhoods that were particularly vulnerable, at risk of losing their homelessness, was something that we shared and learned from within the Homeless Services Committee and our other housing programs.
Thank you. That's very helpful. And then same question, but from a policy perspective. So we have a housing first model here where we've looked at very progressive policy-based solutions from a policy standpoint beyond budget. Is there consistency that you're seeing with other local jurisdictions as well?
That one's a more difficult one to answer.
Okay.
So, not because, well, I think starting from a broader, from like, if we zoom out from a sort of regional perspective, I think we are all aligned in a housing first approach. So I think fundamentally, each of the jurisdictions and continuums of care in the region are effective in how they're approaching serving people experiencing homelessness. What those actual tools look like, those policies, those practices can vary pretty dramatically. Just in terms of either the capacity to serve, in terms of facilities, staffing, provider partners. I think there's a pretty dramatic difference between Montgomery County and some of the larger counties in Virginia, Loudoun County, Prince William County, two of the largest counties, setting Fairfax aside for a moment. Similar in scale and size, but really still working at a pretty foundational level to build a system of care. But this is where our regional committee is an opportunity for them to sort of learn and share. But I think there's certainly, depending on the size of the jurisdiction and the size of the COC, what those approaches look like vary. But I think there's a shared understanding in terms of how to approach it. It's just a matter of, I think, in terms of the number of providers, the number of, folks who are both, frontline and local government staff, I said is different varying on which side of the river you're on.
I appreciate that. That sort of confirms what has been my experience. So I was on that subcommittee in 2021 along with Councilmember Glass, who in the previous term was lead on the council to end and prevent homelessness as a policy issue. And it always struck me that we would go around and give presentations, and Montgomery counties would be like 25 minutes long, and the other jurisdictions would not be quite as long, because we're wrestling with a very complex issue regionally that we know this is a growing problem. It's only going to get worse over the next several years. And for us to have any chance of effectively ending homelessness here, it's predicated on our local jurisdictions also stepping up, because I don't think it's a coincidence that the District of Columbia's homeless population went down by 500 and ours went up by 400. And this is something we've discussed internally because we have a moral responsibility. We believe that strongly, to serve the most vulnerable among us. But we also have to be very pragmatic and acknowledging that we aren't going to have a lot of more resources to work with than anyone else moving forward either. So having this sort of regional lens, I think, is really critical. And my final question for now, and then I'll yield to colleagues, and I will get back in the queue to ask questions specific of our great county. But you're crushing it, Sam. Welcome aboard. Now that there is greater capacity within the Council of Governments, are you going to look at doing a little bit of a deeper dive and seeing what some of those other corresponding issues are that are leading to homelessness in the first place, and then also looking regionally beyond just best practices, but seeing how we may be able to align those best practices more formally?
Yeah, here, I'm just going to chime in really quickly and then turn over to Sam, just to say that, in fact, it's there's been a fundamental shift in how we've been approaching at the Council of Governments and how we're approaching our work. Right, as a nonprofit association, we don't. We're here to convene and share, not to tell any local government what they can or can't do. And so we've had traditionally, I think, more of a hands-off approach. But with Sam here, I think we're taking a really different, fundamentally a shift in how we're approaching this work. And I'll let him take it from there.
Sure. Thank you, Hillary, and thank you for the question. I think the short answer to your question is yes. We are looking for a variety of areas to get deeper into the weeds, and most specifically, where in the weeds we can get to understand how to better improve services across the region. And so I think this comes through in a couple of different ways. So in the slides that we presented, we talked about those working groups, the Regional Case Coordination Working Group and the Data Metrics Working Group, and then also Built for Zero. And I think what we are doing across the region now is taking the Built for Zero methodology, which has some of those standardized best practices, not only at a regional level, but a national level, and then really having conversations with the experts in the room, the data experts, the case coordination experts, and saying, what does success look like in your continuum of care? Okay, thank you. What does success look like in your continuum of care? And then how do we help those systems talk across the region as well? So I think as we look towards areas to dive deeper moving forward, it's having a better understanding regionally of the data and the individuals of people experiencing homelessness, as well as not only talking about best practices, but also seeing those implemented at a more specific level. I think those are a few different areas. The second that Hillary touched on as well is bringing a little bit of additional capacity to some of these meetings and some of these conversations. So in previous roles, I've had expertise in supporting a variety of services in continuums of care, and I'm hoping to bring along that shared experiences to these conversations to help not only be a convener and a listener, but somebody to say, here's how I think we can maybe move in the direction that we've sort of collectively agreed to move in. So I'm excited about where we are going at a regional level, and I think as you continue to ask questions what solutions look like regionally, we are hopeful that we'll continue to have better regional answers.
I'd love to suggest institutionalizing this conversation moving forward so we can have consistency, because we now have a baseline, and it'll be exciting to see you all grow in your capacity. All right, I'm sure all my colleagues have questions. We're going to go down the line here. We will start with Councilmember Sales, followed by Councilmember Lutke, and then Council President Stewart.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. All right. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Ms. Chapman, Mr. Kenny, and Director Hong for your presentation. I too remember in 2015, I think it was Councilmember George Leventhal who led the initiative to end veterans' homelessness and set a trend across the region. And so we were able to do that before, and I have no doubt we'll be able to do that again, especially with COG as partners in this effort. Just wanted to start from the top. The first slide you shared, one of the first slides you shared about the chronic homelessness and looking at the significant numbers in the African American population and knowing how you target interventions and resources to address targeted populations. Just wanted to learn more about how we're working with this population.
Sorry, we obviously haven't rehearsed here.
That's okay.
I think one of the solutions that we've heard in terms that we heard from Chief Hong in terms of how do we drive down rates of chronic homelessness. Part of that is identifying those individuals who have a disability. The challenge, of course, is the limited availability of supportive housing to be able to end those individuals' experience of homelessness. So certainly, I would say the primary intervention that we see in the region is permanent supportive housing. And the challenge, with this, of course, is that with limited availability of those units and beds, people can simply, can time into chronicity simply by virtue of the fact that they have been unable to secure permanent housing. So I think, I don't know, there are certainly a shallow subsidy, your rental assistance program, the SHARP program, these are other, certainly housing choice vouchers is a primary means by which the region has been able to reduce chronic homelessness. But again, always the challenge is those very limited permanent supportive housing beds that we need to be able to address that
It was a
completely.
different slide. That was horizontal with African Americans at the bottom.
Oh, their demographics.
That one, yes, yes, yes. And so, I mean, that's over 50%. So interventions are one thing, but prevention's another thing, raising awareness. And so what preventative measures are you putting in place to target African American communities? I don't know what age range this is. I know it's adults, so I don't know how far 18 and to, I guess, 18 and up. But this is a problem. And so not having targeted resources to prevent, raise awareness is concerning. You're working across the region, and you know that Montgomery County is home to some of the most diverse populations, and it's only growing. And so this is alarming. So I just hope that as you're creating this toolbox of innovative solutions, that prevention is part of it, and targeting the African American community is also a priority.
If I may, I would agree with you in that, when we, I think, all recognize that, systemic racism is the root cause why we see this disparity in our system. It's not the fault of any individual fault of any person who has lost their housing. You may be aware, a number of years ago, COG actually did a regional racial equity systems analysis. We partnered with a consultant, C4 Innovations, to come up with recommendations to help us look at our systems of care, making sure that we aren't compounding any inequities within those systems, and looking at ways to address this disparity, as you noted, because I think there was unanimous agreement that this is both unacceptable and that we need to carefully examine our COCs and make sure that we're doing the things that we need to do to identify, address, mitigate, and reduce those disparities.
Yeah, I just didn't hear any mention of any targeted solution. So hopefully we'll learn more and I can follow up with you. All right. Thank you, Mr. Kenny.
This might sound like it's a side note, but I would
no, go
note
ahead.
that we've also have a regional fair housing plan in place for the region, and that is specifically addressing racial disparities, discrimination, and segregation in our and patterns of residential segregation within our region, and that is directly related to those interventions. And basically, what the intervention is we need to build more affordable housing in places that have not allowed it in the past.
Maybe you should come and testify at one of our upcoming public hearings.
It's all related.
Yes, and to the next population, our veterans. What coordination did, I guess, the COG and our county have when we were at functional zero with the federal government and the state that we are not necessarily able to access now, if at all? Any resources, grants, or otherwise?
So the primary resource that was utilized to reach functional zero in 2015 in Montgomery County, which continues to be available to us for the time being, is our VASH housing vouchers. And that is one of the successes of the initiative to end veteran homelessness is that the coordination across regions is easier because the primary targeted resource is a federal resource. It's already a federal resource, and so the VA is our primary partner as well as our public housing authority at that time, as well as our veteran partners, our community partners who work with veterans to identify them and to ensure they are connected with the resource and getting their documentation in to be eligible for the VASH vouchers. That is still in place. We have a regular call for veterans, a coordinated entry system call in Montgomery County. Regionally, with there is a veteran call. So we are part of a triad, a data sharing warehouse between the district and Prince George's County and Montgomery County, and we share data. And we have been sharing data on veterans because of course, homelessness doesn't have boundaries, and veterans often do. They may have family in one jurisdiction, but then may move to another jurisdiction because they have friends there, they have community there. We have a large community at Progress Place, and so it's very important to have that regional collaboration. And I would say it's not that we've gone so far off from functional zero. It's once you reach functional zero, you also have to be able to maintain it and have the resources continually flowing that are targeted to stay at functional zero. And so that's where Montgomery County, it's not far. We could potentially end veteran homelessness in less than a year if we had all the resources we needed to do that. But that collaboration continues. It has not ended. And so far, the vouchers to veterans are still available. However, with the proposed federal budget, there is potentially a dramatic cut that may happen to all public housing authorities, which could impact the availability of those VASH vouchers. I don't know if you wanted to add more.
Okay, yeah, if you can certainly keep us posted on those, I'm sure you'll hear about it before we do. I also know that our veterans face significant mental health challenges, and do we have mental health supports that we're coordinating with COG to address homelessness across the region? Are we coupling resources?
We definitely are coupling resources. So I meet regularly with Chief Martin to talk about ways we can further collaborate to bring more resources to those experiencing homelessness who generally struggle to access them because they're often not ready to state that they would like to see the psychiatrist, would like to take meds. Sometimes there is an insight, and so we have focused at CEF on bringing resources into our programs that don't require any of that. It's behavioral health staff who are coming in and focused on engaging and building that trust, which is so critical for this population because they've been traumatized, right, over time. And certainly the African American Black population has had such a negative experience with our institutions and such distrust that it is our job to build that trust. So success in providing behavioral health services isn't just having resources, it's having an approach that is engagement focused. So we have a contract, CEF has a contract, a behavioral health contract with Urban Behavioral Associates that's led by Dr. Tracy Burrows, and she and her team go into the shelters and very much focus on the engagement. That's in partnership with the CEF Healthcare for the Homeless team. We have a nurse practitioner who's focused in on behavioral health, who also focuses in on engagement in our emergency shelters, so that when they're ready to meet with Dr. Burrows, not to be diagnosed or anything like that, but ready to start working with her, that she's done the groundwork in building that trust. And that's been really effective, and I'd be happy to share that data in a future meeting about the number served through that contract.
Okay. I don't know if you heard the story. It made worldwide headlines about a young man who was released, stayed with his mother because he had his grandmother because he had nowhere to go, and ended up murdering her. And had mental health issues, experienced chronic homelessness, and it was right here in Montgomery County. And so these are regional connections. So in addition to, finding secure housing, access to behavioral health services for these populations are so key. So I don't know what coordination we can do across the region and advocate at the state for significant investments in residential resources for these populations is going to be a huge priority. So we'd love to hear some updates soon about that. And then just one last question about the about SEF. Well, I'll wait and come back into the queue. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Lukey.
Thank you. Sorry, I always you're not alone in the who pushes what button when environment here. I struggle in the 7th floor, and I want to thank Councilmember Sales for diving into those issues, and I think this is pretty clear from some of my other comments at other hearings. Although the folks from COG have not been before this committee before in its current iteration. I love SHARP. I hear what you're saying about RAP and expanding that, and I think that's something we should dig into more, and what that would look like and what that looks like financially over time as well. SHARP has a 12-month sort of cycle to it. RAP does not, right? Or RAP does? RAP does too. Okay. And so, you know, at some point you would expect some overlap of the two, and then as you are doing more of one, you're reducing other needs, which is something I think, you know, we should have another conversation about here at HHS, and with some numbers to it as well, because I certainly agree that doing things that are more on the preventive side before disruption are critically important. That's in sort of the bigger, broader, low income, we're having challenges with employment, or, you know, there's a disabled child and or adult in the house. And so, you know, you've got sort of a fixed dynamic there that presents a certain scope of problems. Where I have my big interest is in our most challenging of challenging, right? And when you were looking at the slide with the percentage of folks who are single and homeless, you know, a single adult who is homeless, many of them have very challenging needs, right? And I appreciate that the approach has been to try to get them into housing before doing other things, except that. Particularly as we think about what January looked like this year with extreme cold during the pit, and what we're experiencing now with the heat dome, and knowing that those individuals who may be suffering from particular high acuity psychiatric conditions, who can't understand their body temperature, it's a feature of their disease, except that our approach is, well, we'll give them the help if they'll take it, we'll keep offering, but they're not taking it. But by the very nature of what they are experiencing, and anosognosia, they don't know they're not well, and they don't know that they are at risk of hypothermia or hypothermia. So I'm trying to figure out what we can do, because I feel like we're having more people here, and we know, and particularly, and I'm sure Council President Stewart will address that in her comments and questions. You know, Progress Place is a place of convening, if you will. But it's a border area, so we're getting people from other places too. We have our moral obligations, as Councilmember Albornoz raised. We have our legal obligations, right? We don't turn people away and make them show where they live in order to get help. We can't. We're not allowed. And we shouldn't. You need help. But what are we able to do, and how can we work across disciplines better with SEF, with our, you know, behavioral health folks within HHS, with the police department and EMS, who have to respond to these calls that involve this population over and over again, and with the judiciary, to increase getting appropriate, humane care and treatment and a roof overhead for these individuals, because I feel like we're just languishing in that regard with respect to that particularly challenging population. So does anybody have any comments on that?
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on that and really appreciate the question because we in county government have our roles and we have to work effectively together because the problem is complex. I want to acknowledge Dr. Bridgers for the support he provides to all the chiefs at HHS and the expectation that we collaborate. It is the same expectation from our county executive. And I have to say, since I started, which has only been 2 years, but it feels like it was just yesterday in some ways, the collaboration really has been there. And so I'm really proud to say that Chief Martin and I talk about these problems regularly, and there are solutions we're working on that take time to bring to fruition, but she's right there with me at the Progress Place meetings where we talk about the problems of people who are so vulnerable and don't yet know that there's so much help there that they could provide if they say yes. She joins those meetings with me, and she has from day one, and I appreciate her so much for that. In addition, we have been in countless meetings with our public safety, our fire and rescue, and the police to talk about how we do the engagements with encampments.
Right.
Because when they become dangerous, yes, our police become involved, but they still always defer to SEF and our outreach partners. That is not what we see in other jurisdictions in the country, and I'm really proud to be a county where we still always factor in the human element first.
Yeah.
So I think the collaboration is happening. It just takes time to build out the solutions together. I also want to share about our collaboration with the Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. So many returning citizens for many years would be released into the community and not have a plan for those who are unhoused. But we've been working with them over the last, it's been about a year, and I want to express my gratitude to Ben Stevenson for his leadership, because his team and the SEF partners and the SEF team have been working, and now we have an outreach partner who is proactively going to the jail to engage people who are going to be released. We also have dedicated beds at our Neville Street Emergency Shelter. We have diversion efforts, which I want to thank you all for continuing to support. That provide those diversion resources before they return. That is a beautiful collaboration. That doesn't mean that we've solved all the problems, no, but that's a really great start, and that's what I see across the partnerships in the county. And so I just want to thank all of those partners who work with us, but yes, we have to keep doing that because we've done all this and our numbers are rising, so it means there's so much more work to do.
Yeah, and I mean, and I certainly appreciate all the folks that you have named, and I sort of made a joke, or Director Stevenson made a joke during the graduation ceremony recently up at the corrections facility for our GED program graduates, that I am probably the most frequent visitor up at the jail, right? Because I care about the programs and I care about the interventions, and I believe wholeheartedly in both the corrections and the rehabilitation portions of that work. It's fundamental to that, to saying, how are you going to be successful when you do come out of here? And I will continue diving into that as deeply as possible. I think one of the things that I see is I was looking at a particular case and a particular individual that is very recent here, and they have, since showing up in our court system, always lived at either Neville Street or Progress Place as their address, but they have had ongoing criminal conduct that is disturbing. And up until like a week and a half ago, they would get released on bond all the time and then reoffend almost immediately, violating probation and violating, everything. In fact, in this particular instance this month, they committed offenses and then were released on bond. They posted a $5,000 bond. I don't know how, right? And then reoffended the day after that. Then finally they held them without bond. But this is a person who behaviorally has significant challenges that they cannot comport themselves outside and they need intensive care. We're not able to deliver that intensive care. And I don't mean that as, the county, we do have great behavioral health services, but for someone who is involved in the justice system, for whom diversion in this case would not be appropriate, right, given the reoffense profile. And we are at a loss as a local government, and I know this is an issue for Prince George's County as well, because we do not have the space at the state, and the state is not able to fulfill its obligations legally right now. And that puts the onus back on local government, and we don't have a place to take them, nor could we get it licensed that way because of how it all has to work, right? So I feel like everyone here tries their very best, and yet we are at the mercy of a lack of appropriate space at the state in order to receive and give appropriate therapeutic care to our judicially involved individuals who need specific care and treatment in a very managed way. So, I will continue doing what I can. I certainly appreciate all of you for your help on that. I think if COG can step up its advocacy in that regard, that would be incredibly helpful. And all branches of the judicial, all parts, judicial, legislative, and executive are all feeling the pinch with this, because our executive branch agencies are feeling the pinch. We legislatively have to appropriate the budget. No matter what we appropriate, we still can't cure that issue. And the judiciary says this person in this order needs to go to care, and they won't take them, and they can't take them because they have no space. So anything you can do to lift that up will help all of us, again, getting towards our goals, and it helps in a more humane fashion. So thank you.
Thank you. Council President Stewart.
I did, because I think the part that just continues to be so troubling when we don't have the resources we need is the most vulnerable members of our community are criminalized, right? So those with severe behavioral health end up returning to the jail repeatedly, and we know that they need a psychiatric bed in one of our state hospitals, and they can't get it. Correct. And they are released, and then it happens again. That is so unfair to them as a human being. And this is something that Director Stevenson and I, together, we jointly presented data. It's been a long day. We have a Behavioral Health Crisis Leadership Committee, which Chief Martin leads, and it's leadership across our departments, but also across different sectors, so the hospital system as well. And the data he shared, which I know he shared with all of you, is very clear about the connection between the lack of resources, behavioral health beds for offenders, as well as the need within the homeless population. So I think we're building momentum there to build greater advocacy, to have greater advocacy with the state. And I think that's what we need to do together with COG, because it's such a painful issue when you see it play out in the life of a human being who desperately needs help.
And it's, as noted in your slides, when you noted how many 55 and over we have in our homeless population, I think folks think of when those individuals end up presenting at an emergency room, they may have a behavioral health condition, but often that's not what they're presenting for. They're dehydrated. They have other acute medical needs because they're not getting any medical care. And right now they'll present at the ER, which we all know we have bad ER wait times. Then they will be, kind of given a superficial level of care and say, you're okay to go back and get care in the community, except they are not capable of getting care in the community, and they won't. So we keep doing this cycle, and that adversely impacts everyone. So,
Thank you.
Oh, great. Well, first, thank you to the chair for putting together this meeting today, this committee session. And I do want to thank Ms. Chapman and Mr. Kenny. Thank you for your work. And Mr. Kenny, as I said before, I'm so glad you're on board. And I just want to reiterate, it's 6 months now? Yeah, it's just 6 months, which I think is really important for our region because, as Hillary said from her title, this isn't the only thing in her portfolio at COG, and it has been something that regionally we have been trying to address, but I think having Sam and your expertise here is really great. And I think one of the things you started out by saying is that there's great need and we are helping a lot of people. Both of those things are true at the same time. And I know, as Councilmember Lukey said, particularly for my district, since I actually have both of our, I have two of our shelters, Neville Street and the Progress Place in downtown Silver Spring, and I see it firsthand. Chief Hong, as you said, that coordination. I mean, we have Officer Nikki Hawkins and our police department. We have our nonprofit organizations on the street working. We have Progress Place, and we have our Red Shirts and Carson Henry, and a very active business community to help and support. But yet, it is not enough, unfortunately, even though we are helping a whole lot of people. So one of the things, and I appreciate my colleagues' questions on the regional approach and why I'm glad you all could be here. One of the things that I do hear, particularly in the downtown Silver Spring area, because we are so close to Washington, D.C. and Prince George's, is kind of a frustration. And with the numbers coming up, it's hard. And I don't know if, and I know the committees are working on this, but if, who wants to take this question, but if you could share a little bit about the efforts that have been moving forward on data sharing and the warm handoffs, and that I know that's a work in progress, but it is something that is in the work and we're making progress on. They're all looking at you, Hillary.
We can all answer that in different ways. I think, so I'll start with the historical piece. I mean, I'll start with sort of the background piece and what the case coordination group is doing. Then maybe turn it over to Sam and talk a little bit about kind of more, well, there's some historical and more nascent sort of data sharing efforts that I think are really promising. And then maybe Chief Hong can talk a little bit about the work that's happening in the Triad, which is very, very exciting, I think, to us at a regional level. Within the case coordination group, and again, these are the folks who are trying to get people connected to housing resources. So prioritizing and trying to triage essentially all of those the people who are experiencing homelessness who are flowing into any particular system. And we've created a framework that allows us to try and sort of connect the dots for people who may have ties to more than one jurisdiction. And it's a form of a simple questionnaire. Like, we've asked the street outreach workers to just ask the question, essentially, like, do you have other family? Have you ever lived somewhere else? Like, just to sort of identify, sort of ask that initial question, just to help identify those folks who may have ties to multiple jurisdictions. And then within this group, there's a sort of a broader set of basic questions that everyone needs to we've decided these are the things that we need to know to be able to properly hand off, but we've got like a simple template that can just copy and paste into an email. We have a separate email box that's set up specifically for this purpose so that people can come in and they can contact, and we have also sort of our own internal directory so that everyone within COG's committee has access to the information, who to contact where specifically for which, whether it's singles, whether it's families, whether it's a veteran, whether it's a youth. So all of that information is housed within our sort of committee resources at COG, and that's sort of one of the ways that we're sort of addressing it. Now, that is essentially as far as we can go without a true data sharing agreement that would connect the work that we did with Montgomery County, the District, and Prince George's back in 2017 to enter into that data sharing agreement. I don't know if you want to talk about HDIP and sort of where we are with that, but that's, I think, yeah.
Sure, absolutely. I'll pick up where Hillary left off, but I would love to hear from Chief Hong as well, specifically about the Triad work, because I think that's extremely exciting. But I want to talk about it on two different levels. So one is the big, broad data sharing agreement, as Hillary touched on. So CAN right now information between continuums of care across the metropolitan Washington region be shared easily? The answer is basically no. And this has been something on the plate of people working in the region for a long time, and a lot of progress has been made. And where that progress is most clear is in the triad, which Chief Hong will talk about, as well as in the HDIP, the Homeless Data Integration Project in Northern Virginia and really the state of Virginia. So creating a data warehouse within the state of Virginia where continuum of care homeless management information system data, so data on people experiencing homelessness, can be uploaded and then ultimately shared. So a lot of the difficult legal legwork and technical legwork is done in Northern Virginia, and it's about getting folks on board, getting communities on board, getting providers on board, getting people actually doing the outreach on board. So it's that implementation phase that we're really excited about that they are there now. So this has sort of brought about a new wave of discussion at the COG level, at the regional level, about how do we now make the HDIP and the triad possibly be able to talk together. So that's sort of that high-level data sharing piece. The other piece that I think is worth touching on is the more granular built for zero methodology as well. So a lot of what each community has to do is get to quality by name list data. So the idea is that there's 29 different metrics that every community who's participating in Built for Zero needs to be able to check the boxes on in order to say they have quality data. The key where that comes into actually answering a question about who, for example, may be in Silver Springs is that we are now talking about getting closer to apples and looking at data that is going in similarly in different jurisdictions and then being able to have that higher level data sharing agreement to compare those two. So both of those things need to happen to ultimately have a robust understanding of who across the entire region is actually experiencing homelessness and or moving across jurisdictions. So we're sort of working on it from both ends at this time. And then I think the best example of where this is working in practice right now is Chief Hong can talk about with respect to the Triad Group.
Yeah, so it's exciting because it's taken many years to get to the point where we can actually share our data in a warehouse across the district, Prince George's County and Montgomery County. So that now exists. We have all poured our data, several years worth of historic data, into one data sharing warehouse. And we recently pulled a report to see, okay, what is the scope of those who've received services across these jurisdictions, the 3 jurisdictions, and it was tens of thousands of people. So we were, it's not surprising, but to know what to do with that data, we're still working with our consultant, Green River, that is working with the 3 jurisdictions on their platform to make that actionable. So we're still at a preliminary stage, but we've all committed to doing case conferencing, and I believe all 3 jurisdictions are targeting veterans. And so starting with veterans or continuing the case conferencing with veterans, but also looking to expand generally to the full homeless population across the 3 jurisdictions. That's where we're aiming, and we meet every other week to try to move our process forward. And I think one of the things that would be important in the future for the leadership of each jurisdiction is to talk about a collaboration that is interjurisdictional, because each jurisdiction is resourced differently. And a lot of times when we talk about housing someone where they're most connected in the 3 jurisdictions, it's a resource issue, right? And that's what I was saying with the vouchers for veterans. There's less of that issue because the VA is over, all jurisdictions. So that's helpful in tackling veteran homelessness, and we need that in general. Even though we're sharing, it's a first step, and we're really, all of us are really excited about seeing where that leads us as far as that case conferencing. But ultimately, I think there will also need to be shared advocacy, shared leadership across the jurisdictions about how do we come together with an agreement and a commitment to house those we understand are connected to multiple jurisdictions.
Great. Thank you. I know some of that work has been taking a really long time, and I have to say, as somebody who's been following it on the COG board for many years now. I really feel like we've turned a corner, and I'm thank you for all that work. One other thing is, and thank you for the work on the point in time report. And I know it takes a great deal of effort. One of the things that struck me this year in having this conversation and the regional one is, I know in each of the jurisdiction chapters, they talk about the number of the beds they have and other things. I actually think if there could be in future years for point in time, or maybe it's a standalone report and it goes to some of the questions Chair Albanaz started with, and this isn't to shame other people. I want to do this in a way that fosters collaboration and not sort of shaming a jurisdiction that may not be doing the same thing. But I think an understanding of, basically what beds are people providing, and different policies regarding hoteling or hypothermia policies, what percentage of budgets people are doing it. And again, I would want to do this in a collaborative way, but I think it could be really helpful as we're having these conversations in terms of, one, there are the folks like you all who are doing this work day in and day out and are in the weeds. And then there's us. And there's even us, and then there's us, other elected officials who aren't even as close to it as this committee. And I think we need the political will and understanding where we are as a region, not just looking at the numbers of who's experiencing homelessness, because I think when we look at those numbers sometimes and it's like, oh, Montgomery County has increased, in isolation of understanding the policies and the resources that are going to it, I think, one, you could think like, oh, Montgomery County's doing a horrible job. And then Montgomery County gets a little defensive and starts looking at other jurisdictions and saying, like, why are we getting your folks? And I actually think that that is a dynamic that we have right now. And I think having some of those numbers and that context pulled together would advance this conversation regionally. So not a question, but just a thought for you to consider. Thank you.
No, I appreciate the suggestion.
Thank you very much. I'll defer to Council Member Sales, who has a couple of follow-up questions specifically for Seth, and then I'll have a couple of questions after that.
Yes. I can open up my windows. Thank you. Okay. Yes, I know we talked about the warm weather conditions, so thank you to my colleague for bringing that up. With regards to, I think it was Circle 9, life experiences and vulnerabilities for families with minor children, what specific resources do we have to support residents experiencing these intersecting vulnerabilities, those in especially with the immigration issues we're having? We're seeing less and less folks coming forward to report incidences that include domestic violence and other experiences, especially our young children. And so just wanted to know about the information and resources that are available that you are creating, and if they're in multilingual communications.
Thank you. So this again underscores the question of the need for collaboration across service areas and across departments. So certainly with regards to domestic violence, the data that the Family Justice Center has, as well as what we know to be true as far as the households flowing into homelessness who are fleeing domestic violence. We must continue to collaborate with behavioral health. The domestic violence shelter is housed within behavioral health and crisis services, and families can stay there for a limited amount of time, and then oftentimes they will transition to our motels. And the supportive services are not based on site at motels because they're motels, and underscores the need for our family services team at CEF, as well as the abused persons program, the victims of sexual assault program, to continue to provide those supportive services, because the vulnerability, the risk to those families does not change when they leave the Betty Ann Kroenke, the domestic violence shelter. In addition, we talked a little bit about the behavioral health needs that we continue to see and in many ways are rising. And the data you're looking at is self-reported, and I can say just over many years of experience, it's usually an underreporting because, you know, there's a lot of stigma associated with all of these life experiences, and so people may not want to report. And that's why the work that we do with behavioral health, with the mobile crisis team, the stabilization room, what Chief Martin and I do regularly is, because we don't have everything we need, we conceptualize what it is we need. And we both agree that there's that need for the engagement-focused behavioral health services. And so we're working together on a proposal to present to the state about that. They've invited us to do that because we've talked about it with them as an issue that we continue to see in our county. So that's an example of the collaboration that has to continue to occur. Yeah.
Okay. Anything happening regionally with regards to resources for interventions?
I apologize, this was only included in the slide deck because they were presenting it. It was only in your packet.
Oh, okay. Oh, no.
Yeah, we included it as an update from the budget hearing, but because they were presenting it, we didn't.
Oh, okay. Okay. Are you working on any resources for our immigrant populations related to homelessness and offering things in different languages?
You know, I think, unfortunately, there are very limited resources that organizations like CUG could access that local governments, I don't know of any that we could access that you wouldn't also be able to access. But, you know, we have certainly, you know, brought in, you know, partners who've been particularly engaged, well, for years now, ever since the governor of Texas started busing migrants up to the region. And so we've been coordinating with those, like, you know, those two primary organizations. And I apologize that I'm blanking on their names right now, but you know, we certainly have been bringing them in, trying to do what we can, which is to share information about how those partners are operating, how local governments are interacting with them, and certainly trying to understand the sort of the scale and the scope of that issue. Certainly Montgomery County, District Arlington County were ones that were more dramatically impacted than some of the outer more jurisdictions. But unfortunately, we don't have access to any other additional you know, resources that beyond those.
I can add more. My apologies. So I think that the interjurisdictional work with regards to immigrants continues. There continue to be meetings to coordinate efforts for newcomers, immigrants, also with the state New Marylanders. And we did receive some late funding from the state to continue our work with immigrants who are New Marylanders. And that funding, we've been told, will continue into FY26, which is great. And as you know, HHS offers its services in multiple languages.
Yes.
Definitely, you know, the big 6 languages that are represented in our county, and our partners also have access and funding to translation services like the International Rescue Committee, the IRC. There's such a large constellation of collaborations that occurs on a daily basis. It's hard for me to like pack it into a nice place that's easy to explain. But I also want to continue to say that we built a lot of collaborations through the work in preventing. It was the 50 households at the Enclave that really moved forward the collaborations between the refugee resettlement agencies and the community partners that Steph regularly works with. And so they're coming to us more quickly when they're identifying a refugee or immigrant family who needs our services. So that's a big step forward for Montgomery County as a result of those efforts. And I have to continue to thank the Maryland Office of Refugees and Asylees, all the three resettlement agencies that worked with us, because I don't think I reported back that of the more than 50 households, refugee households that were facing eviction, and want to express my appreciation to all of you for your interest, and Council Member Mink, nearly all of those evictions were prevented. There were a handful that could not be prevented because of the status, which they were at no right of redemption, but most of them were prevented because of that collaboration. And I want to say we've moved forward in terms of always working that way. I mean, at CEF, it's never, CEF can, and you all know this, rarely solve a problem in exclusion. We have to work with the many partners that are involved, and so it's become our regular practice, and we're moving forward because each large situation we deal with, including encampments, we're pulling in more partnerships. So I just wanted to, respond that way and add that to what's being said. It sounds like Dr. Bridger.
So good afternoon. For the record, James Bridges, the Director of the Department of Health and Human Services. So as I sat back and listened attentively, I just wanted to add, Councilmember Sells, that this is a great opportunity for our Lighthouse Initiative. Mm-hmm. This is where we see the integration and capacity building assistance within HHS and working with our great partners at the COG. I wanted to say that I know Chief Hung has a lot of thoughts going through her mind, but as I was thinking about it from the director's standpoint, this is an excellent opportunity. We've done this. She is working with our new chief, Ms. Lori Garibay-Aquino, and so I just wanted to just share that with the council, since this is a work session, but intuitively think about all those things that we can do with the initiatives under the Health and Human Services umbrella. We know that there's a immediate threat to our immigrant community. Thank you, Council Member Albernos, Chair, HHS Chair, for the work that you continue to do with us in partnership with the agency. So, but this is a place where we can look at the data, look at all the areas with our regional partners, which is what we're doing now, not only in partnership with COG, but through and with the Lighthouse Initiative, to look at those racial, ethnic disparities that we've seen presented this afternoon. So I just wanted to share that with council because that was at the top of my mind, and I didn't want it to sit while we were having this conversation. So.
Thank you, Dr. Bridgers. I just don't want us to have a repeat of special appropriations in such a tight budget at the end of this year when we're hitting the colder months, and knowing that these populations are vulnerable and less likely to come forward sooner rather than later. So glad that we're working collaboratively and proactively. And so my next question was regarding the continuum of care of these services and programs. Are we putting in place any financial literacy programs to ensure the long-term success of people that we're placing into these housing programs, especially those who are taking advantage of SHARP? These are taxpayer dollars, and it's supposed to be temporary, and we don't want it to become a recurrence, and we know that some people are regularly using these resources. So I just want to better understand the continuum of care and what we're doing to ensure the long-term success of these households, some stability.
Thank you. So the SHARP program in particular has navigation services. That's lighter touch case management. The solution, SHARP as a solution, is intended to move households quickly into housing, and it does have a high success rate. And so the navigation services are working with the families to continually check in on the different things they're doing to increase earned income, to be able to take on the rent by the end of the 12 months. Generally, case management in our system consists of an analysis of budget and expenditures to see if it can work for a household. And oftentimes it's simply that the income is too low to cover all of the expenditures. So case managers in general do that. And yes, we would love to have more financial management resources available to us. I've been inquiring about ones that are free, just because we're really tight on our budget and we move all of our resources to the rental assistance, to the housing programs. And I know that Interfaith Works has been asking me about this, and I said, actually, they asked me about vocational services as a result of, I think, a question you had asked in a previous session. And to the extent that it can be offered and we can refer, we can make that connection. CEF currently doesn't have a budget, though, to expand vocational services or financial management to, for example, all those receiving housing stabilization services. That's our eviction prevention. We would love to do it, though, and we see the need, and I appreciate you always raising that, because that is part of the solution, too. It's always the resources and supports that are available to households. So we will keep looking. We don't have anything beyond what our case management staff do, both at CEF and with our community partners, but they do a regular assessment, because that's just a basic part of being able to regularly pay rent. So that, yeah.
I know that there's a bank on Gaithersburg, and I think Rockville also replicated the program. I'm just thinking about what's coming down the pipeline from the federal government if this bill passes, and the work requirements that are being tied to social benefits, and just thinking, proactively about what we need to do here to stand up those resources and partnerships with places that are affordable gateways to assist our residents with those resources.
Yeah, and that was part of the conversation with HOC earlier today, talking about what additional supportive services could be brought in. And so I think your question very much follows that it's about additional supportive services related to employment and financial management. And I agree, I think we need more of that.
Great. Thank you. I'll be very brief, because you all have done such an outstanding job, and I would love to annualize this if possible, if you all are available. And I think this is probably a good time to do it after budget, and give everybody a little bit of time to breathe. But I guess the data collection is so important, and it too often feels like, certainly regionally, but sometimes individually as an agency, and as you all know, I was head of one for 12 years, feels like you're flying blind. And there's a lot of information that corresponding agencies have, whether it be housing, whether it be food insecurity, whether it be within MCPS, data that would be very valuable to CEF, or data that CEF has that would be very valuable to those organizations. So I would just encourage us moving forward, and I know we all know this, I'm preaching to the choir, but to the degree to which we can cross-reference that information would be very helpful. I keep referring to it, but it's been such a huge success. Our Office of Food System Resilience is doing that, and they are layering their data collection beyond just food insecurity, and that is providing us as policymakers with a much more clear roadmap on how to address the underlying issues that are leading to food insecurity in the first place. And that obviously is what we need to do for our homeless population. So thank you all very much for being here. Really, really appreciate it. And welcome back to Rockville. With that, we are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.